Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Colin Wright-Pruski. Colin is a graduate in our Executive MBA class of 2021, and he and I recently connected via Zoom to talk about his MBA journey. This was such a fun conversation to record. Colin has a lot of great insights about his decision to pursue an MBA, what his Darden experience was like, how the faculty and his classmates supported him as he navigated that, what it was like to be a class president for his class. Colin had a leadership role, and he talks about that. And of course, what he's been up to since graduation. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, here is my interview with Colin Wright-Pruski. Colin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much.
Man, how great is it to have you here on the show? I haven't seen you in forever.
I know. It feels really good to see you. Whether or not it turns out to be great to have me on the show, I don't know. But I was excited to get the phone call. I'll say that.
I'll say this is not like a humble brag or anything. I've done around 200 or so ExecMBA podcasts. I got a good feeling about this conversation. No pressure, by the way.
Man, that's great. Sweaty palms over here.
Well, I think the last time I saw you, I'm trying to cast my memory back to that day, was maybe a fall meetup for your class, formal reunion of sorts at Sands Family Grounds. There were some of your classmates there, were some faculty there. You had class sessions, and then you had a reception afterwards. It was a lovely day. I think that was the last time.
Leave it to Darden to say, hey, we're going to give you some pre-work to come in for a little reunion. You know what I mean? The learning never stops. But yeah, it was awesome. I think particularly, coming out of some really deep stuff in regards to the pandemic, that time for us to be together, because many of us, were disrupted. 4 or 5 quarters into the learning experience. And so, to see each other face to face and have some of those conversations was really pretty awesome.
If I remember that day correctly, Colin, and this is very on brand for you, our listeners will learn this. You ran to that event. Is that right?
True story. Yes. Carried a change of clothes on my back. And the campus is only a couple miles from where I live. And some people show up on a scooter or in a lift, and I use my 2 feet or my 2 wheels now and again to get there. So it's great.
Yeah, we are just steps away from the Mount Vernon Trail, a very popular destination for runners, for bikers, for pedestrians. I'm one of those pedestrians. I can't say that it is always the most pedestrian-friendly environment out there. I'm just going to say that. I'm just going to throw that out there.
No, I think that's totally fair. But I'll say this too. That works out really well. At the end of a Friday night or a Saturday after you're just kind of brain fried there up in Roslyn, and so to get out and get some fresh air and stretch. There were a lot of deep conversations had on that trail. I can promise you.
It's fun to see students do things like exercise together or take these kind of decompression breaks. We had a sunrise yoga group meeting that happened this past weekend with our Executive MBA class of 2023, bright and early. I think it was 6:50 a.m. on a Sunday, but I think a solid turnout. And people enjoy doing other things during these weekend residencies than just going to class. I mean, it was a busy weekend for that class. They, on Friday night, went to the MGM casino for an NCAA watch party.
Wow.
And then, of course, students plan all sorts of things on their own. And then Sunday, a little bit of yoga to kick off the day.
Great way to get to know your cohort. The things you choose to do outside the classroom, I think, are probably as important as what takes place in the classroom.
Agreed. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit more about you. First of all, how are you doing? How are you and Dorota doing at this time?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, we are mostly well. A lot of adjustment. Right after graduation for me came a new little human. We're both first-time parents. So little Charlie is in our world now, and thankfully he is thriving. I sometimes wonder, as a new parent, whether or not I truly am or not, but his little smile brings a lot of joy into our life. And we're just getting used to the new rhythms and things that go along with that. It's amazing, thinking back to what I was hoping for to have in terms of free time during the program versus what exists now. And I think about some of the folks that I knew in the program that had kids while in school, and it's literally makes my brain just melt because I have no idea how people pulled some of that stuff off. It's just incredible.
It is amazing. And what we always tell prospective students when they're thinking about this time management end of things is you matriculate at Darden, you come, you look around in that room. That's 135 or so people on the first day of class. There are going to be people in that room that have far less on their plates than you do, right? It's just the nature of their lives, where they are, what they're juggling. And then there are definitely going to be people that have a lot more on their plates.
Yeah.
There may be a few people who find themselves, in maybe either sort of upper end of that distribution curve. But nevertheless, most people can look at somebody and say, well, maybe they don't have as much. And wow, that is incredible what that person is doing in addition to school.
But it's beautiful. It's beautiful how it brings the group together, because I think people are relatively quick to identify that. And it sort of forces this idea of just being open about who we are. So I think rather than trying to kind of image manage or project, I guess you could do that. But in theory, if you're going to get the most out of the program and be able to honor your commitments to one another, you have to share some of that stuff, which is kind of part of the fabric or the secret sauce, I think, that really creates a special cohort.
Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit more about your background. What did you do before coming into Darden?
Oh man, what didn't I do? I think that was one of my greatest fears in the first conversation that we had about whether or not I could get into this place. My career is non-linear, maybe compared to some. I spent time in the hospitality and restaurant business. I've generally managed a fair amount of good-sized team spread out across the country, traveled a lot for work historically, but it's involved everything from industrial manufacturing and process improvement, kind of internal consulting services type work, to digital media and marketing and small business consulting, all with some degree of kind of teaching and coaching and people development along the way. And so my heart really exists with people. I say kind of that my personal mission is to leave people on the planet better than I found them. So within all those sort of environments was this aspect of how and where could I improve, not just the place that I was working in, but how could I make it better for those that I was working with? And that's kind of how I try to operate.
Well, I do remember our early conversations, and I want to stick with what you said, like, being unsure about whether you could get into Darden or you had the right background, or that feels real for a lot of our prospective students when we have these conversations. I think people are imagining who they think is in a business school classroom at a place like Darden against maybe what they've done. And sometimes people worry like, oh, I haven't taken these classes, or I'm from this particular industry. I haven't had a particular set of work experiences that would, what would you say to those prospective students?
Oh, man. I would say, rather than seeing those diverse experiences as a limiting factor, see those as something that actually enhances the classroom. And I think that applies in a professional context as well. I think part of what Darden really helped me discover is that because I had done all these different things, it allowed me to have a view on problem solving and a view on reading through a case. And if you think about engaging, a diverse set of stakeholders as an example, or you think about trying to bring a new solution to market that's maybe a little bit different than what we've tried so far, often those diverse experiences are the things that really kind of set you apart. And so people will actually come to you and go, oh, tell me more about this, or tell me more about that. And so I think you and a handful of others that I could name out loud from Darden really helped me kind of learn that about myself and learn that about my story. And so it's really changed how I see myself in the world, as well as how and where I think that I can contribute and maybe have something to offer.
We were on with some incoming members of our ExecMBA class of 2024 and some 2023s last night for a town hall. We start having these town halls in the run-up to the
Cool.
start of school. I mean, here it is March. In about 5 months or so, class will kick off in August. I'm sure you remember orientation and LR1. But what was great to hear, and so the 2023s, they're now in quarter 4 of the program. They've got their sea legs moving right along. And one of the students said, this is my background from education. Spent my whole career in this kind of nonprofit world. You should know there is no quote unquote traditional path to Darden. And it was so, to me, it was great to hear a student verbalize that and say that, because it feels very true to the experience. We have so many different kinds of people in this classroom, and very intentionally so.
Yeah. And I came to really appreciate that. That was one of the best parts of it for me was getting to hear from some of those folks that I never may have crossed paths with. And it was really special in that regard. People that I still talk to, and experiences that I remember that I think helped shape kind of who I am and where I am today.
So how did you get interested in Darden? How did Darden end up on your radar?
Yeah. So I'll give you 2 different stories. One is, that decision for me started about a decade earlier. I still remember the lunch that I was having in Amarillo, Texas, of all places, where the idea of going back to school really came up for me. And I was the guy that graduated with my degree in undergrad and said, I will never go back to school. So there I was in Amarillo speaking with this woman, brilliant woman who was going back to get her MBA. And I think I was more excited about it for her than she was. And so all of a sudden I started to think, well, maybe I really do want to go back to school, but for whatever reason, I couldn't quite get over the hump. And gosh, you talk about the support network that is needed to do something like this, particularly when, in my case, I was nearly 40 and, still thinking through that decision. And I'd met the person that is now my wife, and she's one of the greatest supports and what allowed me to kind of get through the program. But through conversation with her, she could see how excited I was. And so we were together on a run, and I see the Darden sign from the Mount Vernon Trail, because I love to run at night, and start looking it up and doing my homework and my research and go, oh, you know what? That place sounds really interesting. And so I was the guy that was, listening to the podcast and reading articles and learning about faculty. And I thought, I want to do this, but I don't think I can get in. And so she actually started my application. And so she got a couple lines in and said, hey, I need you to finish this. And I was like, what are you working on? And she's like, it's your application to Darden, because you should be there. And I don't know if I've ever told you that. So I don't know if I breached some sort of contract, but maybe Scott Beardsley or somebody shouldn't listen to this podcast. I don't know.
If you did the substantial work on it, you completed it, she just got the ball rolling for you and just kind of opened it, I think we're okay. Colin.
Yeah.
That is a great story. And I can't hear Amarillo, Texas without thinking about George Strait and that Amarillo by Morning song. But we will continue moving on. Those of you who are less familiar with the song, worth checking out. A lot of references to, well, life on the rodeo circuit in Texas on that one. So, okay. So you come to Darden, you start the program. And what was it like being back in school? Because you were someone, at least professed at an earlier juncture in your life, someone who would not do more school. So here you are, you're back in school. What was that like?
Yeah, I was the classic case of imposter syndrome. I remember talking to Jim Dietert about that super early on, and him explaining. I think even in LR1, he had a big slide up about this and kind of shared his own story. And so I had to get over that hump. The other thing that happened in my world is I had a stroke going into the second on grounds of Q1. So there I was actually in the hospital, getting blood measured and various treatments and things like that. And I'm trying to log into class. And my wife's looking at me going, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I want to participate. I'm loving this thing. I want to do it. And so that was really a sign for us that it's where I needed to be. It's where I was meant to be. And at that point, we just had to figure out how I could stay in the program, because the conversations that I had with the program team basically said, hey, look, we'll do everything you need to support you. And it's a rigorous program, so we can't compromise the standards. So we're going to leave some of this decision making in your court to decide whether or not it's still the right time and or the right place. And amazingly enough, the program team supported me. I had some things will probably bring tears to my eyes if we're not careful here, from classmates that helped kind of get me through those early days, or I guess finishing up Q1 and starting out Q2. And then it kind of took off from there.
So Colin, obviously that is quite a start to an MBA program. It would have probably been pretty easy for you to say, hey, look, I think this is just too much at this time. I was really struck by what you just shared, that you and your wife felt like this is where you were supposed to be. I mean, it also sounds like your classmates were part of that story and the program team.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I still have my classmates gave me 2 cards, and actually a couple of gift cards for food delivery service, just because I knew that we'd be scrambling trying to get through. Laura Bordoni, for those who have not met her, who's just a rock star, was almost part therapist, part coach, part mentor, and then faculty even, that I spoke with, just to say, hey, look, here's where I am. I believe I can get through this. Are we okay? And certainly, they were willing to set up one-to-ones to make sure I could be prepared for exams and kind of do the things you need to do. But again, this idea that, Darden is a rigorous program. And I think there was some great learning in there, just in terms of how to ask for help, because there was a standard that had to be maintained both for me and for the program. But I knew I couldn't do it on my own. And so it was kind of an all boats rising together situation. So, all those groups of people that we're talking about were instrumental, not just at that time, but really throughout the program in terms of getting through. And if I had to write a list of thank yous, this podcast would get really, really long, because there's a lot of folks that helped me along the way.
Well, there's so many great people that support students who go through this program. Laura Bordoni is absolutely one of them, and I believe she won the Friend of the Student Award for your class. Well deserved.
So. Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and your point about asking for help and being accepting of help in that way, we talk about this with incoming students a lot, because it's psychologically more complex than you might think it is for people who are used to having everything buttoned up and used to knowing exactly what they're doing. I think it's fair to say that it's rare for people who are in an executive MBA program like the Darden program to have a day at work where they really don't know what they're doing or have to ask for a lot of help or whatever. I mean, high functioning people, very successful people, and to be in an environment where you feel challenged, where you feel outside of your comfort zone, you may be struggling with some of that imposter syndrome. Am I supposed to be here? This kind of thing. And then to ask for help. That's not always the easiest thing.
It's true. I think there's some learning that takes place in that regard. For us, I think the faculty did an amazing job of establishing norms, really each class every quarter. I mean, that's something that I was actually just reflecting on some notes about the other day, because in a professional context, I think there's some real magic to that, whether it's norms for meetings or norms with clients or what have you. And so that just became part of the ethos of our cohort, I would say. And so whether it's, classmates I can think of that had children, or another couple of people that I can think of that just had really particularly busy seasons with work. It became okay to ask for help, and B, you realized really quickly that people wanted to help. We wanted to see each other be successful, because it wasn't about one person becoming a quote unquote valedictorian. Rather, it was about seeing us all walking across that stage together and celebrating a moment. And I think that's something that's really special about this community that Darden really helps develop through the program.
Yeah, the way I think about it is, you could try to do this program on your own, but why? Why would you do that? That doesn't make sense. It's so counter to the culture and the spirit of the program.
Yeah, that's right. And I think in asking for help, you learn other things about how people work. So you learn about the way that they interpreted a case, or the way that they might put together a presentation, which just adds to your tool belt. So as you're thinking about, your own portfolio or a way that you might do something differently the next go around, it becomes this kind of virtuous cycle. And I think makes you a better person. I think it makes you a better professional and really a better classmate too, because your contributions maybe become a little bit different, or you give somebody else space because you want to hear from them in the classroom. And so all that stuff really kind of goes hand in hand.
I want to stay just for one more second with the thread that we're talking about here and talk about the faculty, because we get a lot of questions from prospective students who ask about sort of the faculty and their understanding with conflicts, or people having like life events and things come up. And what we share is like, well, they want to work with this population of students. They're excited to work with executive MBA students, and they know how much students are doing in addition to school. And so their approach when things happen, they do walk that line of like, this is a rigorous program. There's a standard here, but there's also empathy there. What can you share a little bit more about the conversations that you had with the faculty? Because I think it's important for students to hear that.
Sheesh, that's another topic that I feel like we could go pretty deep on. Because I remember reading all the awards that Darden faculty have, right? And I sitting there going, well, is this true? Is this just a marketing tool? What's the story? And I think, hard to believe, but I think the Darden faculty are maybe even better than they get credit for, particularly through the lens of what you're describing, which is this human element. And I think in the EMBA program, it's interesting because the faculty seem to really want to be a part of that program. It's not a requirement. So they understand the complexities of, managing personal life, professional life. They do it themselves. Oh, by the way, they're humans. And so it's just amazing to see how often they would show up early for class to get to know us, or stay a little bit late to answer questions, or set up office hours to spend additional time going through particular frameworks, or, for some of the quant stuff maybe that folks were struggling with. And man, their ability to juggle in real time to me was also one of the most impressive things, because they certainly have a vision for where they want to take a conversation, but they also really are eager to incorporate those different perspectives. And so both kind of staying on topic while allowing us to circle around it for a while and kind of hear those different perspectives. I think they're amazing at what they do. And I don't know how else to say it beyond that.
So you navigate the first couple quarters, and I guess you start to find your groove a little bit after you get through the health scare, and you kind of clear some of that. Do things start to feel normal is a strange word to use, but like whatever this new normal is for you as you do an MBA program in addition to everything else in your life, does that sound like the case?
That's a great question. I think there's some element of muscle memory that creeps in there. So you have your rhythms, you start to learn, all right, what do I need to block out in my schedule, and how does that work? But along the way, Darden starts to sprinkle in these opportunities to get involved. So you've got various committees. In my case, I was a class rep, and so there were some additional kind of extracurriculars outside of things. But there were people that wanted to really get involved in this idea of making Darden a better place and leaving it better for those that came behind us. And so it's fun because it's exploratory in that respect. And it's almost this idea of like the more you give, the more you're going to get back. But I think what was interesting for me is I actually wanted more. And so whereas I think I saw it as a bit of an obligation early on, as I started to go through the program further, it became part of my community in such a way that I looked forward to the on-grounds, right? I was eager to dive in and to get to do the stuff, and ended up overloading some classes as I got later into the program, because there's these 21 months that you commit to, and so it really helps you prioritize right away. And there are very few moments in life, I feel like, where you're going to be able to do that again. So it's kind of, for me, I wanted to make the most of the opportunity while I was there. And Darden gives you every chance to do that because there's so many things that you can get plugged into. And so I think for those that just need some degree of consistency and take the basic stuff and get the right amount of credits to be done, yeah, you can do that. But I think also for those that want to learn more about everything from private equity to diversity, equity, and inclusion, or there's some great women's leadership groups there. I mean, it's just on and on and on and on. It's really cool.
Yeah, the town hall that we had last night, the topic was around community. And a lot of that conversation is, well, not just opportunities for engagement with your classmates, what might that look like, but opportunities for leadership. And I think sometimes people think about executive MBA programs and that sort of thing may not be top of mind for them to be part of an organization, to have a leadership role. And it's maybe not everybody's cup of tea. You know, people, you have to make of this experience, you know, what's important to you and what's valuable to you. Not everybody's priorities should be the same as they approach an executive MBA program. But if that's something that you're looking for, if it's something that could be meaningful to you, you can find it here.
Yeah. I mean, and we had, a classmate who started a new club, you know, and my understanding is that the 22s that came behind us have done some of the same thing. And so I think, there's this opportunity to continue evolving the program as the needs of society around us evolve. And our learning kind of needs to be adjusted along the way. And so I think it's really amazing that Darden gives us the opportunity to kind of develop Darden alongside of ourselves, so that we're relevant and able to do with it what we please. You know, Darden talks about being transformational leaders and making the world a better place. And I really believe that we are all committed to that by signing up for the program.
So how did you decide that you wanted to serve or to have this opportunity? It sounds like you kind of very much approached your MBA experience with this, I want to get the most out of this mentality. But how did you decide that, like, being class president, you know, putting yourself out there in that way was aligned with that goal?
Oh gosh. There were a couple seeds planted. I think Darden can be sneaky in that respect, where they go, "Hey, I see something in you, maybe that you don't see in yourself." And so I had no aspirations of being involved in that, you know, before I started. But there was a particular weekend where I think we had, you know, an evening reception, and those seeds were planted. And then there was the opportunity to speak about it on a Sunday. And so I actually had a variety of conversations going into that. And I think there ended up being maybe 10 or 12 of us that just said, "Hey, you know, this is a thing that I'm interested in. If you would honor us by allowing us to serve you, the class, then, you know, I'd love to be a class rep," kind of a thing. And I remember telling Dorota that I didn't think I had a prayer, because I didn't feel like I was particularly connected in the classroom or with my classmates at that point in time. And you know, results were announced, and I was one of the people selected. And so, you know, that was a great way to get to know people even better, you know, because I think in that capacity, you have a degree of an obligation just to listen to what it is that people need as they're going through the program and advocate for them. And so that's what we did. And it also gave me a little bit of community, because there were 3 other people, you know, Ali, Sunkit, and Justin, that I got to work with on a regular basis. I can't remember if we had like weekly meetings or every 2 weeks, or we probably adjusted it as we went through, but it was great. I mean, it was just so fun in every respect. Hard, but great.
Well, I think about your class as a class that accomplished a lot, despite the fact that, you know, halfway through your program, you have this like big disruption that happens with COVID, right? So, I mean, not even halfway, right? March 2020, all of a sudden the world changes. And what had been to that point, you know, this hybrid program, 2/3 in person, 1/3 online, went at least immediately all virtual. What was that experience like? And as somebody that had that kind of role within the class as being somebody that folks look to and maybe a steady influence and a helping hand? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, that was hard on everybody. There may be a few exceptions in the world, some of these really large corporations that do that contingency planning stuff, but I know I had not planned for a global pandemic. So, many of us in the class were kind of redlining a little bit. What do we do with childcare if that was in our lives? What do we do with work? We've got other people in our lives that are impacted. We had classmates that lost family members. So really, this idea of empathy was critically important for everything we did with the program at that point. But furthermore, I think an opportunity to learn at an even deeper level, in the sense that we had to get very vulnerable with one another and really try to understand what we were going through, so that as the program was trying to flex and understand what it was people needed, they could deliver while again maintaining those rigorous standards. And there was a lot of stepping on the gas and then pumping the brakes, because as you probably recall, Brad, I mean, everybody was trying to adjust on the fly. Governments were trying to adjust. We were trying to figure out what's going on with vaccines. We were trying to figure out how to get back in person, how to create a learning experience that was just as good, if not better, for everyone, while also knowing that, their schedules were likely going to be impacted. And man, it was hard, but also amazing to see within, I don't know, I'd say almost like 6 or 8 weeks, how quickly people were able to adapt and adjust. And I know Darden made some investments in technology, and faculty had to relearn how to kind of conduct the classroom, because that was just going to be an ongoing thing. And so, we got creative in lots of ways. And then quite honestly, I mean, gosh, a couple months later was the death of George Floyd. And so we had a number of other things that we were thinking about as a collective group of people, and some things that were really, upsetting to us about just kind of where the world was at. But it provided this really unique opportunity, again, to learn about other people's experience and how those things were impacting how we showed up in the classroom. But then also, we adjusted some curriculum and ended up, really talking and thinking about leveraging and learning difference, and how that applies to, diverse perspectives, diverse teams, unleashing potential within yourself and within organizations. And so I think in some ways, it brought us together, because, the class of 22 absolutely went through part of that as well, but in a different way. And so I think for a lot of us, we just felt like we had something kind of special together after that, because it's like, when else, hopefully, no other class has to go through something similar. But, I think to the events of today's world, it's this idea of like, there's no going back to quote unquote normal. And so I think there's also some leadership lessons in there around, well, how do we have this future orientation? How do we think about those experiences and apply them in ways that allow us to have a better impact on our community, a better impact on our companies, be better family members, be better friends. And so there was just tremendous education, because all that stuff changed how we were even reading and looking at cases and the disparate impacts on various groups of people. And so it was everything from supply chains and operations contexts, to leadership skills and communication. So there was just some amazing stuff that came out of that.
Yeah, your class, so much happened in the world while you were also in school, by the way.
Yeah.
And I was talking with one of your classmates, Samantha Shedd, here on the podcast. And we were running through, pandemic, George Floyd, social justice, Black Lives Matter, and sort of this awakening around, and a lot happening in conversations and dialogues in the world, which of course, very naturally, that comes into the classroom. Like Darden, you have a platform for this, but I also feel like your class did a great job of seeking additional opportunities, really pushing to say, like, how do we have more of these conversations? How do we have more of this content? There were a number of students in your class, yourself included, that really played a role in helping to elevate these conversations to say that this is a major priority for the program.
Yeah, I think looking back, at least I'm hopeful that most of us would say we're really grateful that Darden was open to those sorts of adjustments and listening and kind of being able to meet us in the moment, because we were all learning together. And I know for me personally, it was a great way to learn about where I was at with particular points of view, some things that I really needed to unpack, my own biases, how I bring those into conversations in every context of my life, and so I think there's a lot about that helps me be better for people now going forward. I think about conversations with colleagues professionally over the course of the last 2 years. So both while I was in the program and then, post-graduation at Darden. And I really do think I'm a better person for having not just gone through the program, but gone through the program while these things have been happening in the world, because I look at all that stuff very, very differently now. I think I ask questions differently. I think I'm better about looking at sources of information and trying to dig 2 or 3 levels deeper to understand, well, what's the argument that really supports that? Or what's the bias that this writer is bringing into the conversation? And so using those lenses critically, but also then, hey, Andy Wicks, what's it look like to argue that from the other perspective and the other point of view? And how might that help inform how I'm thinking about these things? And so all of that stuff, I think, just is awesome to carry forward I look to build my career and seek opportunities for growth.
Well, for those of you who are less familiar with Andy Wicks, first of all, you should do something about that. Andy Wicks is an ethics faculty member here at Darden, and just tremendous person. Those classes, I could always tell when someone has just had class with Andy, whether it's the business ethics class in the core curriculum or one of his electives. Because, first of all, the class spills out. Everybody's still talking about whatever they were talking about. Yeah. And you just tell, these are profound classes. I'm trying to think of the elective that he has offered for the past couple of years that have been
ultimate questions.
Oh my gosh. This class, man. How do I get in this class?
I know, right? I can't tell you how often I think about that and where I can work in an ultimate question into a meeting or a conversation with somebody. It's great. I feel like he should get 1 cent royalty for every time that crosses my mind or a conversation. That guy should be on an island somewhere that's titled Ultimate Questions. I don't know.
Can you tell us a little bit about that elective? Because it is a very, very cool class, and probably something maybe people are a little surprised to hear is in business school, but it is very relevant. But it's maybe a surprising elective.
Yeah. So it's if memory serves correctly, and you should keep me honest on this, Brett, it's one of the electives that's offered later in the program. So I think it's between Q7 and Q10. And so by that time, you start to get some flexibility as a student in terms of choosing kind of your learning path. And so Ultimate Questions comes in at a great time, at least it did for me, because you really get to take a deep dive into who you are. And so, what is your purpose? And what does it mean to lead a good life? And so you can look at those questions like that are almost really impossible to answer, but he challenges you to give an answer, to have a perspective, and then incorporates all sorts of other things kind of along the way. And so, we had conversations about technology and healthcare and, AI and in vehicles and self-driving vehicles and things. And so he throws all kinds of curveballs at you, some which you may have prepared for, but I think many of which we did not, in terms of, do I think about the implications of the software that might choose to hit a child in the street versus an animal in the street? Those are real things, and what if it's my child versus somebody else's? And so there was just all kinds of real probing led by Andy, but also then introduced from our classmates. I remember one of my classmates, Asia, who introduced something called Ikigai, And so there were a number of us that were just fascinated because it's a great kind of Eastern world way of looking at purpose and flow and some of those sorts of things. And, another group that was part of that class actually went through writing their own obituaries. And so I've never done that. And so to hear how they're thinking about this idea of legacy and, man, I could go on for quite a while.
Well, I wanted to give some airtime for that class because it is a really cool elective. It is one of those electives that people do really talk about because you do ask, ultimate questions, like these really, really big questions. Colin, I want to come back to something that you said previously, because when I first started here, when I was actually looking to potentially join the admissions team, I talked with a couple of alumni who I still keep in touch with, see from time to time here.
That's good.
And one of them actually commented that his time at Darden had made him a better person. And I'll be honest with you, I was coming from a law school background, and I had ideas about what an MBA program was and why people do these kinds of programs. And that was not something I was expecting to hear. But I have now been around 7, 8 plus classes here at the Darden School, just executive MBA alone, not to even count full-time MBA students as part of this. And it comes up over and over again. People feel like they've become a better person. Like, what do you chalk this up to?
All right, I'm going to do that classic thing if you'll allow it, Brett. But I'll actually ask you to ask yourself that question, because I think you've got more experience there than I had that 21 months, right? So like I have a very limited perspective, but you as the guy that came from a law school and were like, well, what is this mumbo jumbo? Like, what would you say has Darden made you a better person? And if so, like what led to that?
Wow, this is a real pro podcast guest move. Now, Colin is the host of the ExecMBA podcast. I'm just now appearing here. So, all right, I have a couple thoughts on this, but I want you to test. These are hypotheses, ideas that I've developed, but I would appreciate your reaction. Well, first of all, I think that there's something really profound by finding yourself in the midst of like 135 or so very talented, smart, bright, motivated people who are all kind of going through this a transformational experience. They're all very intentionally chosen this program. They're here because it is participatory. They're going to be an active participant in their learning experience. And it's not easy to find people that are kind of engaged in this kind of growth and development. And as part of that, you do end up asking questions about yourself and really starting to kind of develop a sense of like, where are your strengths? What can you add? Where do other people do better than you? And how can they be helpful to you, like your blind spots too? Mm-hmm. And so your self-awareness, if you're going about this and doing it with intention, I think your self-awareness goes up significantly.
Right. Yeah.
And it's that self-awareness that I think affects how people show up in other parts of their life. All of a sudden, you start to develop some sense of like, well, these are some things that I've traditionally had blind spots about, or I may not have been aware of that I do, but now I know about those things. And it also, I think there's a real kind of, the culture of Darden is very much around collaboration and helping and giving where you can and accepting help and being open and being vulnerable. I mean, you spoke very eloquently to the power of like letting go of whatever image you are trying to cultivate of yourself and just putting it out there and saying, this is hard for me. I'm struggling with this. This has been a tough week. Let me tell you about what's going on, because you'll find that there's a lot of other people on the other end. And I think really rich relationships, I think really, really strong kind of interpersonal dynamics are rooted in that sort of self-awareness and the willingness to be vulnerable with each other. And I think that's something that students here have a lot of practice with, and they're able to do it in a safe environment where everybody is learning and growing together. Yeah. So that those are my working hypotheses, at least to this point.
Well, I think you passed the test. I think they're very good hypotheses. So I'd give you a DP on that one, I think, Brett.
Well, Colin, I appreciate that. Wow, a distinguished pass for me. Man, wow. So the hosting the podcast does have its benefits. I get to hear people answer these kind of questions and reflect on it, and just being around students, it's most admissions people would tell you it's a very humbling thing to kind of be surrounded by people going through this kind of experience and getting to see people grow. I want to talk about your career interests, because I feel like when we first met to where you are now, there's been some evolution there, maybe a job change or two. So how did your career interests grow and then change, evolve over the course of your time in the program?
Oh, yeah. I think about this a lot. It's funny. I actually go back periodically and read some of the things I wrote like early in the program about where I thought I'd be and what I thought I'd be doing, and then where I am now. So it's a great question. Because I actually, one of the things that I thought Darden would help me do is kind of narrow my focus. And, as I talked to you earlier about my career, right? It was not particularly linear. There was a lot of stuff kind of going on in there. And so I thought, well, Darden's going to make me figure out my path. Well, what Darden did is it blew up that idea of a path, right? Like I went to thinking the world was, this tiny box, and came to realize it's this ginormous kind of Pandora's box. And so while that was really, really stressful, it was also one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I began to think about and see opportunity really, really differently. But Darden also does a great job of forcing you to reflect on who you are, both what you want to do, but particularly like why you want to do it. So it again kind of forces you to go a few levels deeper. And what I realized is consulting was going to be a great way for me to do some of the things that I wanted to do, which is, transform organizations from the inside out, really embrace this idea of business being a force for good. And so I thought if I could both work with leadership team members, but organizations themselves on things like their business model and their people model, and how they think about things like DE&I and ESG, and some of the other things that the world is talking about quite a bit right now, given current context. What sort of impact could I have? So I have entrepreneurial ideas and endeavors and things that I even gave pitches about while I was at Darden. But when I stepped back, it was like, well, if I do my own thing, I can have this minimal impact. But if I go this other direction, which is what I'm doing now, and then management consulting, I felt like my impact could be much larger. And in theory, I could make a lot of other people's lives a lot better by transforming those organizations. So you're right. I now work for an organization called FTI Consulting, and I get to work in a wide variety of industries and with a wide variety of companies, because the practice that I sit in particularly, which is called People and Transformation, is really kind of dialed into those things and really always trying to bring back solving problems to people. How does it impact the people? How might they do their work a little bit differently so that they can make the organization a little bit better? Where might there be more opportunities for this workforce? And I think particularly, in the context of what, some people call the Great Resignation right now, it's something that a lot of leaders are wrestling with. And it's great for me to be able to test some theories and hypotheses about, what can work and how can these organizations be thinking about their culture and their employee value proposition and how all that ladders up to purpose and strategy and, some of those other things. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate your point around self-discovery and how that this experience is not about narrowing at all. It's about widening. And all of a sudden you meet people who said, I know exactly what I want to do. And they're going through the recruitment process and process of applying and pre-matriculation to, well, funny that you should ask. I'm now exploring a few things, including an industry I knew nothing about before, but I've been having some conversations. We took a class, I read a case, networked with an alum, and now I'm thinking about a completely different career path.
And totally.
That's the beauty and the benefit of the program.
The way that I described it, and if you like this, you're welcome to use it at some point. I'm not saying it's any good, but the way that I described it is like somebody was giving me a gift card, right? And so I was thinking that Darden would give me like one store to go shop in, and I'd be like, oh, I'll be able to just walk in and spend it and walk right out, right? Well, no, somebody gave me a gift card, and then Darden gave me like, I don't know, the largest shopping mall in the world. and I'm looking at 1,000 or more stores, and I'm like, I have no idea even where to begin or what I'm supposed to be shopping for right now. So, yeah, there you go.
Well, that's great. An incredible career team of people who are there, and you get to take courses like the professional advancement course. Obviously, you also have classmates who are all doing interesting things, and a very live network of people for you to tap into, not to mention the Darden Alumni Network. Well, Colin, I got a couple questions for you as we wrap up here. First of all, what are you looking forward to in the months ahead? You got anything on the horizon?
My mother turns 80 this year. I don't know if she appreciates me naming that out loud. Sorry, Mom. But for that, we are taking a family vacation. And I honestly can't remember the last time that like my sister or my nieces, like all of us are kind of going to be together in the same place. So really excited about that in July. And what else? Oh, I got a bicycle. My wife gave me a bicycle for our anniversary. And so I now get to commute to work on two wheels, which is one of my favorite things in the world to do. I don't know that I love riding in DC. I'm still kind of figuring that out. But man, going from riding a little bit in some rough wintry weather to doing more of that in the spring and summer, I'm excited about that. So those would be my top two right now.
Well, that's great, and always appreciate a mom shout out here on the podcast. So, and congratulations on the bike. Yeah, you're right. Biking in DC is fair to say an acquired taste, and please be vigilant out there on the streets. Yeah. Well, last question. We asked the same last question of all of our guests here on the podcast. Wonder if there's a piece of advice you would share with our prospective student listeners. And I readily acknowledge that there has been a tremendous amount of advice already dispensed on this podcast, but maybe a final word here.
Sure. I mean, I think it's similar advice to what others probably are sharing consistently along the way, which is like, if you're at all on the edge for doing this, right? Like if you're the person that's out there and going, I kind of wanna, but I'm not sure, I would say, go do it. Figure out like what you need to do to get off of that seat and just dive right in. And I think you'll be amazed once you get there at the levels of support that lift you up. And as you said, really do make you a better person, because I think you realize how doable these really audacious goals are, which I would argue like a Darden MBA is a really audacious goal, but it's actually really doable if you're just willing to make that commitment.
And that's obviously a very powerful thing for people psychologically. I see so many graduates who have this kind of framework now. Well, I did that, and that was really hard, but I have a Darden MBA now. What else can I take?
Totally.
What else?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Well, Colin, always a pleasure hanging out with you. Great to see you.
You too.
So glad, excited for everything that's happening. I haven't seen you since your new job, so congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. It's an exciting time.
And thank you for sharing your story and your experiences with our listeners.
No, you bet. Thanks for having me.
And that was my interview with Colin Wright-Pruski, a graduate in our Executive MBA class of 2021. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA at darden.virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.